So today you'll notice I'm up in the pulpit, which is kind of unusual. And the reason for this is that my sermon is a bit exposed, which you'll see. And so it's a little easier for me when I'm going to offer such a personal reflection to be a little bit hidden, because usually when I'm up amongst you, it's so lovely and intimate. But here, I might need a little bit of space. And for me, control and competence and success are so primary and important that without them, nothing else makes sense. So when I'm not in control, and when I'm not successful, and when I find myself incompetent, I can't really make sense of it. And apparently, over the course of my childhood and even into early adulthood, I had crafted a very specific set of maneuvers that helped me to continue to privilege those values of control, success, and competence over anything else, including how I might be feeling. So then, for example, if I was feeling unsure or out of control or incompetent, I had an elaborate mechanism of responses in place to restore my sense of control. Does that resonate with anyone else? Anyone else do that? A little bit? A little bit? Yeah. Some of you didn't raise your hands, but I know you. The trouble is, and this is the trouble, was that I had no clue that I was doing it. And I had no idea that if a wrench got stuck in a gear, or if anything fell off track, or if the machine came apart, I would have no practice in constructing a response. I had, in other words, built my own way, but that way stopped working. And to say that discovering this wasn't simple would be an understatement. The first challenge I faced was in recognizing my problem. When my therapist suggested that I was suffering from an anxiety disorder, I was shocked. I felt like, generally speaking, I was fearless. I wasn't anxious. And for most things, with some notable exceptions, I was able to face down my fears and see them as fun challenges. So, for example, if I needed to enter a room full of powerful people, I would stare at that room and I'd set a goal, meet all of them. And then I would do that and I would feel satisfied. And I faced this as recently as Thursday evening. So our daughter's beginning a school in the fall in one of the big nursery schools here in this neighborhood. And maybe you know something about the pressure that goes into nursery school placement in New York City. And for what they especially call the baby Ivies, which most of the ones around here are, parents feel this extreme pressure to secure admission and begin the admissions process pretty much at conception. And that's not even an exaggeration. Needless to say, since Patrick and I were on the opposite coast when we conceived, we didn't do this, and so we just thought we were ineligible for it. But with some help from friends in the neighborhood, she did get a slot, which is great. And so I had to go to the fundraiser for this school on Thursday, and I thought, well, here's a time when I should be scared, right? This is a group of powerful people. They make way more money than I do, and I was entering this storied space in the powerful room, and I didn't care. I cared for her sake, but I wasn't intimidated. And here's what I found myself doing, was that I was falling for the script that I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. And so I was taking on someone else's fears and realizing that that's really not the kind of thing that bothers me. But the problem here is that because there are some things that I can overcome, things that maybe others find more challenging, like standing in front of people and talking, that's not really a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal, but it's not hard for me. But because I feel like I have overcome some things that people told me I should be afraid of, I had very little awareness of what I actually was afraid of. And someone once told me not to fear. And maybe it was even an angel. But the fear not of the angels means don't fear God's intentions for us. It means that when God speaks to you, don't be afraid to follow through on what God has asked. It does not mean, however, that we shouldn't know our fears. I had this wrong, but that was my way. My problem is that I had let so many other people define what I should find fearful, i.e. fear the powerful, which I never did, for so long that I didn't even know how to name the fears I actually had, like fear your inability to be effective. The denial held such a powerful effect in my life. In other words, I thought that I had this covered and I was just fine, and that was my way. But that way ended one day. It stopped working, you see, as it does. And if the road you find yourself on seems to have hit a roadblock, if it seems even to have brought you up to a cliff, then I would suggest that that way is not God's way. Our way is not God's way. Please don't forget that. Our ways of ignoring, or as maybe you might do, amplifying or over-amplifying our fears, are not techniques that God intends us to use. In our latest round, in Patrick and my latest round of trying to decide whether or not we would have another child, I've actually tried to approach this question in another way. You see, my body taught me another fear I hadn't really known, and that's the fear of my own death. And I reflect on this for Mother's Day. When I learned about a year and a half ago that the pregnancy that I had was not viable, I let my fears get in the way. I knew that I was going to miscarry, but I also knew that the insurance I had didn't cover the procedure that would help us to avoid the miscarriage. My salary back then was so tiny that we didn't have any discretionary income. Our insurance didn't cover so-called abortions. And I couldn't imagine having to pay for surgery out of pocket. So I decided to let nature run its course, against the advice of my medical practitioners. Now hear this. I could face down the most powerful people. I could show up on the news and be courageous. I could step into a 206-year-old pulpit as its first woman. Not the first woman to stand here, but the first woman to, you know what I mean. But I could not for the life of me, literally, for the life of me, make a choice on behalf of my health because I was terrified of the financial consequences. And I think about this on a day like Mother's Day, a day when we hold a flower. Peonies are my favorite, by the way, just note that. A day when we hold a flower and give thanks for the people who, from whatever perspective, have mothered us. My own mother is a force of a woman who models exactly what I'm talking about. Probably her way became something I adapted for myself. And some of us may know our mothers and some of us may not. But some of us may hold our mothers in the highest esteem and some of us do not. But many of us are conditioned to connect our problems to our mothers while letting the other parent, sometimes a father, though not necessarily, off the hook. Whatever our family configurations, we have to acknowledge that our way is very much shaped by the way we have inherited from our ancestors. And I consider this from the perspective, then, of inheritance. The nature of inheritance has so much to do with the things that come along with our birth. For some, this may be something as delightful as inquisitive brown eyes. For others, like me, it can be a stubbornness as strong as the locked jaw of a pit bull. And for many others, it might be addictive behaviors, or others, our inheritance might be the beautiful ancestral home that our ancestors left for us. None of these, of course, are mutually exclusive. But this, I think, is a good time to return to our text for today, where Jesus says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. And if that were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you?" Do you hear Jesus claiming his inheritance? Jesus' inheritance isn't some exclusive manor with underpaid servants. It's not a house that requires its guests to enter the sunken place. It's not a plantation. It's not Downton, what's a weekend, Abbey, where some live on top and the most live underground. Jesus' inheritance is a home with room enough for everyone, with dwelling places that aren't the same and don't require the same needs and don't turn anyone away. The Lord knows I've taken up some stinking, ugly, ill-fitted dwelling places. I've set up residence in rooms that were not ever designed for strength or for love. But due to circumstance, I've walked right into those rooms and thought they were home. That's the power of an enemy to your well-being. It teaches you the way you're going is your only option. It whispers in your ear that your dwelling place is all that's out there for you. And it promises you that no one else is going to come along and that you've exhausted all your options and that you don't have what it takes to make your way to a better place, so that you instead call this little hovel home. But it's not your dwelling place, and it was never your inheritance. Did you even know that Jesus' inheritance is specifically for you, for us, for everyone without exception? There is a place prepared for you. There is a place prepared for you. Can you say that there's a place prepared for me? Turn to your neighbor and tell them there's a place prepared for you. I hate turn to your neighbor. I just did it. I know. But there is a place prepared for you. How can you trust this? How can you know it? How can you never forget that there is a place prepared for you? And since that's the case, don't you know that whatever way you may choose, whatever way you might stumble into, however you might then fall, God is going to help you to find your way. What the past has given you is part of you, but it is not all of you. What your habits have taught you about the way to be and to live may be exactly what you know, but God's way hovers close, very close, and it's always just one step away. A step that you can take any place, any time, under any circumstance, no matter what shape you're in, no matter what body restrictions you have. This kind of step is one you only have to take in your heart. But when you can't seem to figure it out, God is going to take your hand and lead you the way you've been needing your whole life. So, do not let your hearts be troubled. And if they are, know that troubling and face it down by the grace of God. Know your anxieties and respond to them. Treat them as you must, knowing that God is joining you on that journey. And most importantly, when you cannot find your way, and when the road looks dark, damp, full of chaos and chasms, and when roadblocks seem the order of the day, even if you don't know the way, you do know Jesus. Know Jesus, and all of a sudden, you know the way. Know Jesus, and you might get 95% of it wrong, but it won't matter, because you know Jesus, and you can always find your way back. And what does that mean? Part of it is revering him, understanding that he is beyond your capacity to understand, trusting that Jesus means more for and to you than anything else could. Part of it's wondering about what he did in his life that you could learn from, and deciding to follow him above all else. And part of it is just as simple as knowing that he's the one that you're meant to be like, but you never will be, while knowing that he's never going to hold that against you. Keeping that knowledge in place without using it as an excuse is called humility. And we humble ourselves then to be exalted. So don't let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe in Jesus, See the dwelling place of the Most High as having a home for you. Wherever God is, that is your place. Wherever you are, the way will meet you. Wherever you go, you will end up with God, who was with you every step of the way anyway. Amen? Amen.